Excellent. You good, David?
Yeah, very good.
Perfect. We're learning about the laws of Tevilat Kelim, immersing vessels. We saw the psukim yesterday. Tevilat Kelim, learned out from the words that you should sprinkle. We don't really sprinkle, we immerse, but the verse actually speaks about haza'ah, sprinkling. In Mei Nida is mikvah waters that a Nida uses. And we talked about the usage in Judaism of the mikvah for transitions between one level of holiness or one type of service to another status. And I'll just mention before somebody asks, but it's a fascinating halacha that somebody who was a non-Jew and does giur, many poskim say automatically when they go to the mikvah, it's as if all of their dishes went to the mikvah too. So they don't actually have to immerse all their vistas. No, so again, there's two issues. If you had been eating non-kosher food beforehand, hachsharat kelim, for sure you have to do. You have to make sure that non-kosher food gets out, and with whatever the method of kosherizing those dishes. But just in terms of tevila, in terms of changing the status of bringing them into the mikvah, that's something that many poskim say you can be lenient about, and
So specifically like
toveling, yeah, specifically toveling, yes.
Isn't that also already kind of a tendency in that direction? Because I seem to recall that I had plates that I owned, half mine, half my father's, who wasn't Jewish, and I was told I didn't need to bother bringing them to a mikvah because no matter what I did, they were going to be 50% owned by a non-Jew anyway.
Why? Now they'll be owned by yourself.
Well, no, I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about when he was alive, though.
When he was alive, if they were his, then that's correct.
50% mine. There was never an issue that I couldn't eat off of them as a result.
Correct.
It makes me think that maybe mikveh.
But when he died and they became all yours, you
Right.
probably had to tovel them in the mikveh.
Correct, but that makes me think that the rule it's a more lenient rule than some of the others, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Could be. It's hard to make such estimations. You're not comparing objects, like comparing apples and oranges. Right? Each halacha has its parameters. Call it lenient or machmer, it's hard to say. Yeah.
So when it comes to it technically belongs to a goy loophole, would that work with someone who's in yours? Like if there's something
Yes.
so I could give it to someone who's in yours just once they're.
Yes, but before we learn about the loophole, let's learn about the laws of the actual proper laws and see what it applies to. And I don't want to talk about that loophole now.
Okay.
Okay, David?
Okay.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about that
It's
loophole.
really cool that he just uncovered the. Can I share just something really cool?
You can?
So
Okay,
there's some
I'm
things
not going
that
to fight.
you can't put in a mikveh like a kumkum.
Oh, I
right?
told
It's like
them
food.
about Justin's
Right.
machine. I told them about Justin's.
But therefore, the ideal really would be to do the same thing, but with do it to somebody who's in the giur process, because then they finish their giur, and it's as though you have in fact doubled it.
Yep. Yeah. It could be. Could be. That's a double loophole. That's right. Give your dishes to someone who's about to do gior, and then they all become kosher. Again, it's a matter of debate, but there's room to be lenient. Anyways, let's start from the beginning and learn some of the rules. Which vessels does it refer to? So the Torah spoke about, we read the psukim yesterday, they mentioned 7 different types of metals. Zahav, kesef, nechoshet, barzel, b'dila, and ufaret. And the rabbis said that there's a similarity between metals, and so all metal vessels have to be toveled in the mikveh. But the rabbis added that glass also, because just like metals can be melted down and refashioned into a new vessel, so too glass can be melted down and refashioned into a new form. And so glass and metal require tevila. I will just add one more thing. I'll take your question just 1 second. there are opinions that this is mitzvah doraita, like we read it from the psukim, right? So it's a mitzvah doraita to do tvilat kilim. However, there's other opinions who say, no, this whole idea of putting dishes into the mikveh is a rabbinic institution. The pasuk doesn't exactly say immersing in a mikveh. It says sprinkling with water. It's a little unclear what the verse meant. Maybe it wanted to talk about tuma and tahara, right, ritual impurity for the Beit HaMikdash, which we don't have nowadays. So it could be that it's not a mitzvah doraita, but it's a mitzvah derabanan. But most poskim hold that it's doraita, and therefore, when there's a doubt, we go l'chumra. But the law applies midoraita or midirabanan, whichever it is, primarily to metals and also glass. It gets extended into glass. Any other material, plastic, earthenware, ceramics, wood. You're going to make wooden bowls, a salad bowl. Does not require tevila in the mikvah, even if it was made by non-Jews. So there is, what happens sometimes that you have is earthenware, which is glazed with a very thin layer of glass-like your cup.
I did toy with this when I got it.
Aha. So there's a machloket. There's room to be lenient because, again, maybe it's only rabbinic and this whole idea of glass is sort of a rabbinic extension. So many people do tovel. They immerse these types of vessels. These earthenware, which is covered with a glaze, but essentially porcelain and things which are made from earthenware don't really require. Also, if you have metals which are covered, like a fry pan has Teflon on it, right? Or you have sometimes metal like this, which is covered with, it's called enamel, I believe, right? This is not, and this might just be paint, but there are some vessels which are actually covered with a, sorry?
Is it scratching off at all?
This, so not so far.
Okay, then it's enamel.
This is probably enamel. It's not, paint. I have another mug which is painted, and that paint is really coming off. So, but those require immersing just like metal, because essentially it's metal. So we really can follow the primary makeup of the vessel and not worry too much about the covers. Yes?
So, okay, the metal ones get cleansed. This one also, the glazed ones?
This one, there's room to be lenient about this type of material because it's primarily earthenware. The glaze is just very thin. And so that's primarily exempt from tevila, where this one is primarily chayav in tevila because this is primarily metal. And it's just has got a little bit of a covering of enamel or something like that.
So
Yeah.
goats doesn't have
No, this one is chayav and this one's patur. That's what I'm saying. There's a difference because this is primarily metal. Metal is chayav, obligated in tevila. And earthenware is primarily exempt from tevila. There's room to be machmer a little bit because that's very glass-like, the cover, the glaze. And some people say you should tovel it without a bracha.
So
I would tovel it without a bracha.
So the only thing that you can
You only make a bracha, which is really obligated on metal or glass.
forks, spoons, things like
Forks
that.
and spoons,
But
yes.
goats you don't want to have, because all goats are like from
All
plates.
plates.
Goats, plates.
Plates. No, there are glass plates. People use glass plates. Some people use metal plates. But anything other than that, I wouldn't make a bracha on. If it's earthenware, if it's glazed. We'll get to that in a second. Yes, there, Reuven. Yeah.
So if a Jew goes into a non-Jew's home and he's thirsty, wants to have something to drink, can he drink out of a glass cup? What can he drink out of? What can he not drink out of?
Right. So there's two issues. One is kosher versus non-kosher. Is there any taste in there that's going to get transferred? Right? Maybe he used a non-kosher soup mix or something like that. So maybe there's non-kosher taste, which is going to go into your glass of water. We have to learn the rules of absorbing taste and how that works, which we're not doing right now. Right now we're talking about the laws of immersing, tevilat kelim. So if it doesn't belong to you, you don't have a mitzvah to immerse the vessels. So that's not a problem. But in terms of kashrut, usually if it's cold, there's no transfer of taste. So a glass of water you can drink in anything, pretty much, if it's clean. And so even if there is non-kosher taste absorbed in that vessel, whatever it is, it won't transfer into your drink of water, cold water. Hot water is more of a problem. It's an interesting question, but that's more to the issue of absorbing taste, which we're leaving for the next chapter. Now we're talking about the rules of tevila. Okay? Another question, yeah.
I don't know, why is plastic, exempted from these things? What is the?
Well, it's not. It doesn't say plastic in the Torah. We try not to make up new laws that on our own. Plastic didn't exist, and plastic. I understand your question because, well, like metal, like glass. We said the rabbi said that glass is like metal because it can be melted down and reformed. So plastic can also be melted down and reformed. And you're right, that's a good way of thinking, but there was no plastic in the times of the Talmud, and the rabbis didn't talk about plastic, and they didn't say plastic is obligated. Some people say, just to be safe, you should tovel plastic without a bracha, but others say, we don't make up new laws that are not from the Talmud, and therefore plastic is exempt from the rules of well, we're not finished yet. We're going to see that even metal and glass, not every piece of metal has to be tovel. It's only dishes used for food. So we're going to talk about the usages. So many of our plastic containers, is that considered to be used for food or storage? We're going to get to that in a minute. Yes, Moshe.
I was going to say plastic could be considered earthenware because it's petroleum based.
Okay, there's a reason to make it putter.
But we wouldn't have had to double it on that basis. I thought we just said we should stop earthenware.
Yeah, if it's earthenware.
That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. Yeah. If you have a knife which has a metal blade, but a plastic or a wooden handle, we follow the majority. The blade is the essential part of the vessel. Same thing with a pot. You can have a pot with wooden handles. You have to immerse the pot with the wood. We go by the central usage of the vessel.
Same thing in reverse.
And yes. If it's a wooden bowl that has metal handles, you don't have to immerse it.
Non-metallic scissors that have a metal frame.
We'll get to scissors in a minute. The question is how you use the scissors. Usually scissors is not used with food. But if you have special scissors for use with food, you would have to tovel them because the essential part is the metal, is what cuts the metals.
Non-metallic, like they sell scissors.
So it's plastic. You don't need to tovel them.
There's,
If it's plastic, it doesn't need toveling.
there's scissors that we use for cutting corianders or maybe petrozelia, or something
Yes.
like fish.
Yes. So if it's made from metal, you have to tovel it. Yeah. Okay. For example, any vessel which people use for eating and drinking and comes into contact with food is included. So we have plates, we have cups, we have cutlery, we have serving dishes, we have pitchers and trays of all sorts. Also for dishes used for preparing food, like pots and pans and baking pans and skewers. They're used for cooking the food. Nets, what are they called that you barbecue on? Grills. Reshet is the Hebrew word I was trying to translate. That is chayav and tvila. Okay, so when you buy your new barbecue, you got to take your grill to the mikvah. Yes.
If I got
You separate off the grill and you take it to the mikvah. If you can't, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it when you can't. But essentially, you have to.
A grill, isn't that its use is through fire? So isn't its way of kashering or
That's the second halacha. We're in the first halacha now.
right?
Mikvah.
But
It doesn't matter whether you use it with fire or with water or with neither. The very fact that you use it and it was not made or was owned by a non-Jew, and now a Jew wants to use it in his kitchen, he has to put it in the mikvah, regardless of how he's going to use it.
But you can't just kasher it and that will exempt you from having to.
No, two separate mitzvahs. Yes. You were here yesterday?
Yeah.
So that's what we tried to clarify. I guess was good that we're reviewing it. Two separate halachot. It could be it's totally kosher. You still have to put it in the mikvah. And it could be that it was created by a Jew, so it doesn't need, and it was owned by a Jew, so it doesn't need any mikvah. But if it absorbed non-kosher taste, it has to be kasher. So two separate mitzvot, and sometimes you need both. Sometimes you need neither. Sometimes you need one and not the other. Yes, Asher.
When you say about regarding a Jew and non-Jew, what if the company that manufactures the grill is a Jew? So it's okay, and it's not.
Correct.
Does it company?
Correct, yeah. The company's owned by a Jew, even if all the workers are non-Jews. It goes by ownership.
Right.
But we said that if somebody in the distribution chain, if it actually becomes owned by the people distributing it, and they happen to be non-Jews, so then it doesn't help you that the Jews own the factory. If he actually sells it, sometimes he has agents which work for him to distribute it, but he remains the owner, and so then it would still not require tevila. Shua, thank you. I'd love to take your question, but just please come to speak to me at 1:45. Perfect. Yeah, what's your question?
So with regards to the ownership, if I own a 100% kosher, Jewish-owned grocery store, and this grocery store happens to sell things like knives, like for meat and stuff like that. But the knives are made in a factory in China, and the factory isn't owned by me. It's just some normal knife brand, right? But I own them in my store. So if someone buys from me, do they have to tovel it?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because it was owned by a non-Jew, and you didn't tovel it. I know, but you bought it, but you didn't do your mitzvah.
What if he does?
If you would be really, really super scrupulous, you'd say, I don't want to be selling people things that are not ready for use. So you could do a service and say, I'm going to put all of the dishes that I sell into the mikvah on behalf of my customers. Or, like I said the other day, you have stores which sell dishes and they have a mikvah on premises, and it's up to the purchaser to put them in the mikvah. Yeah.
Is that why, like, when you buy like just aluminum pans in Israel, like one that you use a few
Disposables
times,
is your question.
Does that mean they have a texture on them? Does that mean that they were?
Actually, no. That's usually for the second issue. Disposable aluminum pans don't require tevila. I think
How many times can you use them though? Because I had somebody who was telling me that you have to throw it out after one use, or sometimes I'll reuse something 2 or 3 times. Is that an issue?
It is a question. It is a question. For example, I'll tell you another example. You buy a jar of pickles, glass jar.
We don't know whether.
It was not toveled. It was made in China, and it has a kashrut on it because the rabbi made sure that they don't put anything bad in the pickles. You wouldn't want bad pickle juice, non-kosher pickle juice. Could happen. They put all sorts of additives. Yeah, you can sit here. Sure. Bevakasha. But then what about the vessel? So no problem, because you're just, that's a container. So we're going to see right now, containers are not considered to be used for eating and drinking. It's just like a storage container. Storage containers, you don't have to tovel. But the problem is, when you finish all the pickles, some people keep the jar. And then they put in some sauce or some hummus that they made, or they reuse the glass jar again and again. So the first time you used it, it was fine because that was just a storage for the pickles. But the second time that you're putting food in it, some people say you have to be careful about that and put it in the mikvah before you use it a second time.
Even though there's a kashrut.
Yeah, the kashrut has nothing to do. The kashrut that's on the kashrut is the second issue. It's because for aluminum pans, at least, the kashrut is for the juice and the pickle juice and for aluminum pans they have kashrut. Usually, it's because at one point they were smearing these aluminum pans with some kind of oil to make them shinier, and that oil. Somebody suggested might be problematic, might not be pure vegetable oil, it might be something else, and it might be not kosher, so they started to put kosher supervision on it, and of course it makes a lot of money. Nowadays you can have kosher supervision on tissues, exactly, yeah, exactly, everything. So it's an industry like any other industry, but in terms of, that's why that kashrut is on there, it's not for the issue of tevilah.
So the mice, should I throw out a pan after each use then?
No, I don't think so. But we'll get to that when we talk about aluminum disposables. No, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if there's the logo that says that it's made in Israel, the kippah logo, even if that's written over there.
No, if it's made in Israel, it's probably made by Jews, and so they follow the majority. If the majority thinks it is.
Glass container.
Okay.
So I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
it makes sense. Yeah, if it's made in Israel, then they can assume it doesn't need tevilah. Yeah.
Okay, that logo can.
Although that may apply only to the food, but not to the packaging. So I don't
what's
know.
your advice on that?
Usually it says on the package. Usually it says on the jar or whatever it is. It should have. It should tell you where it's from. But you find out. Yeah. Yes, Moshe.
So, you know those like Danish butter cookies? They come in that like aluminum tin.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was, let's say, having a party, I would take that tin, set it on the table, take off the lid. So the container that I'm in, people are eating out of that container. They're taking the cookie out of that container and eating.
Mm-hmm.
Does that become problematic because people are eating directly out of that container?
It's not a problem. The problem is if you want to put food directly touching the container. You can use that container to keep food in it that's wrapped, like candies, that each comes in its own wrapping. You can use any container for that, even if it's not been toveled, even if it hasn't been to the mikveh. If you just storage, that's what I was saying, storage that for wrapped tea bags, for example. The tea doesn't ever touch the container of the box or the. But if it's leaves, then it's a problem. If it's leaves, loose leaves, then it shouldn't be in a vessel that hasn't been toveled. Right.
This exactly is what I was talking about.
Perfect. Great. Yeah. So usually the food doesn't touch that. Not the first time and not the second time.
The food is touching this though.
Give me the package. Let me see where it's made. This aluminum thing might even be made in Israel.
It's an Israeli
Yes.
It's
It's here, made by Strauss Coffee BV in Tzfat.
Oh yeah, it's Israeli.
And the container, I imagine it's also created in Israel, though it doesn't say explicitly. But I imagine if the food is made here, then they make the container too. But I don't know if they import them. And if you want to reuse this, is the question.
Because I don't throw those out.
Okay. Yes.
You know this brand, like this Hilchot meal from Quaker? It's like also like this thing like
okay.
this. Also like the food, the Hilchot is in it, and it's touching the container. It's not, most of the time it's like aluminium. It's also to be cleansed.
If you want to reuse it for food, then you should probably tovel it. Yes.
You buy it like that from the store?
You could buy it for the store. Yeah, for the first time, that's coming to you as a container. But after if you want to reuse it, okay. How do we tovel a dish? You might be familiar with how you tovel a person.
You go to the mikvah.
Person has to take off your clothes. Yeah, you go to the mikvah. You go ahead.
You go to the mikvah. You put the dish in. You let it go for at least a second or two, so it can surround all the edges and everything. Then you bring it back up. But you also have to make a before at the beginning.
Femod. Very good, Ezra. Excellent. What were you saying, Shua? Rudely interrupting in the middle, but what were you saying? Is something adding?
I was reminding him that you need to say the bracha first.
Excellent. Okay, so yes, there is a bracha if it's metal or glass. If you're doing plastic or earthenware that's been glazed, don't say a bracha. Only metal or plastic. And you go to the mikvah. That mikvah has to be a kosher mikvah. And it has to be totally immersed in the water all at once. And we're going to see the rules of hachsharat kelim. When we're kashering vessels, this law does not apply. But for tevila, mikvah, yeah, that's, I don't know if you're aware, but when a person goes to the mikvah, they have to make sure that they don't have any Band-Aids on them, or any even stickers or things like that. So for dishes, you also have to make sure that there's nothing left on them. The glue, the price tag that has glue on it, you got to scrape that off. And one second. Let me talk a little bit. If there's dirt on a person's body, it's not a kosher tefillah. If there's dirt on the vessel, if it's dirty, it's not kosher.
You should properly wash it.
You have to wash it off. Yeah, most dishes that are new usually are the ones that you're toveling. Usually they're clean, but if they're not, if they have some leftover dust, could take off the dust. Now the one second. There is a leniency here. Also regarding tefillah of people, but also regarding dishes, and that is the halacha is very clear that what's considered to be a chatzitza. Chatzitza is something that separates you from the water, or the dish from the water. You're not allowed to have any separation, because the water has to be touching the entire vessel at once. The halacha is very clear that if it's a tiny little bit of a chatzitza, something that's small, it's not the majority of the vessel, right? There's dirt on it, but it's a tiny little bit of dirt. Most of it is clean. It's just a tiny little speck. And most people don't really care about that little tiny speck. They would leave it on. So it's not chotzetz. It doesn't create a division that separates it from the water, and it's kosher. Ideally, we try to get it all clean. But if it was left on, and it's just a little minimal amount, it's covering a small amount of the vessel, and especially if people don't really care about it, then there's room to be lenient that it's still kosher, even if you didn't take off the sticker, for example. Sometimes, even if you take off the sticker, a little bit of glue remains, because the glue, it's just hard to get off. They use the wrong WD-40. Yeah, oil usually helps you, or soap. They help to get the sticker, the remnants of the glue off. It's best to do that, to get every little bit. But if you didn't, most people don't care. And if people don't care about it, it's not good, and it's a minimal amount, then it's still kosher. Also,
is that b'diavad?
Yeah, I would say that's b'diavad. Best is to try to get everything off. As Ezra said, you take the entire vessel, but it has to be totally, the waters have to be touching all sides of it. So how can you hold it? Because your hand is a chatzitza. Because the water is not going to get in between your fingers and the vessel. And so sometimes there's a basket, you put it in the basket, but sometimes you can go like this. Split second. Just sort of. Yeah. It's dangerous because you could not be quick enough. Let go for a second, and then shoop, it fell down. And then it's down in the bottom of the mikvah, and then it's not pretty to go down into the bottom of the mikvah. It's like too deep, and it's sometimes very cold and dirty sometimes. So anyways, so there is another solution. Let's say it's something very expensive. You don't want to risk it falling out of your hands. There's a second best. It's second best, but it is a technique that works. And that is you put your hands in the mikvah, and then your hands have mikvah waters on them. And so when you are holding the vessel, there's mikvah waters already in between the vessel and your hands. And then when the rest of the mikvah waters join up with the mikvah waters, which are between your hand and the vessel, that's kosher too. So you can do that if you have no other solution. But most mikvahs have, like Asher says, there's a basket there, and then you put the stuff in the basket, and then you can shake the basket a little bit because the basket's also touching the bottom. The basket's touching the bottom of the vessel, and so if you just lift it up a little bit, so it has to float for like a split second, just so that the water's. And if you have a bottle with a bottleneck, you gotta tilt it to get those air bubbles out. So if there's air bubbles, it's not the water's not touching that side where the air bubbles are. So this is the practical things about how to tovel. Yes, Moshe.
So let's say I don't have a lot of free time, and I personally need to go to the mikvah for myself. When I go to the mikvah for myself, can I bring my brand new dishes with me and just kill two birds with one stone, mikvah myself and the dishes at the same time? Or is there a problem because I'm dressed in house? Is this just because you have to do the mitzvah?
Well, you would have to say the bracha when you were dressed, but if you said the bracha before, there's technically no problem with doing that. It's most cases, it's prohibited. Why? For safety reasons. Because if the glass breaks, if a glass falls out of your hand, and you do it in a regular mikvah where people are around, it's going to be very hard to clean up that mikvah. There's glass at the bottom of the mikvah. People go in there without shoes on, they could get cut. And so usually we have a separate mikvah called the mikveh kelim, vessels. Separate mikveh, which is usually accessible from the outside.
What if you were doing it at, say, the beach?
Also dangerous to break bottles on the beach.
Right, you're going to be doing it at the beach anyways, it makes no difference to that.
No difference. Halachically, it's fine. Usually the mikvahs say on the big sign, do not do dishes in the mikvah where people go. Go to the special, usually it's like a trap door. There's like a door above a little pit, and that's where it's designed for dishes, and that's where you can say your bracha, and there's no problem of being undressed. That's ideal. But technically, you're right. It's a mikvah that's kosher for a person, it's kosher for a vessel, and the opposite. Asher, yeah?
Regarding the mikveh, can we do it like, this is shower can be a part of a mikveh now, so can we do the same method of kelim as well?
I'm not sure what you mean, but in most cases where a mikvah is required for halachic reasons, shower does not qualify.
Okay.
Shower does not qualify.
It qualifies.
Most,
No.
yeah. Most cases, there's different there's different requirements of halacha. Most requirements of halacha which require a mikvah, it must be a mikvah only. No shower, no bathtub. That doesn't qualify. It has to be rainwater. It has to be water that's collected without going into a vessel soon. Most 99% of poskim assume that the pipes, the internal plumbing that we have, invalidates the waters for use as a mikvah. So even if you have a very big bathtub, which has 40 sa'ahs in it, 200 liters, most are not. But let's say you did. There was a rabbi in America about 150 years ago who was trying to convince people to go to the mikvah. And he said, this is America, nobody's going to go to the mikvah. He came up with this system, how, I think I have it at home, there's a PDF of it. He said, everybody should make a mikvah in their own home. And you can disguise it, like it has to be really big, like the size of a big aquarium, like the size of a chest of drawers or something like that. And he said he came up with this whole idea that he believed that the water from the plumbing through those pipes, it doesn't invalidate the waters for a mikvah, but he still needed to get a big enough size thing. So he came up with this whole system how you could disguise this tub as a chest of drawers, disguise it as some kind of a bureau for your living room or your couch. Secretly, you'll have a trap door, and inside the couch will be this big amount of water, and it'll all be kosher. So it's very creative and very daring and smart of him. Unfortunately, most poskim, 99.9% of poskim, say that he was wrong about using the waters that come from the city plumbing system, because those pipes are considered to be vessels. and invalidates the water that goes through them, even if it comes from rainwater from the sea or whatever it is. Nowadays, even that's not true. But so no, you cannot usually use a shower or a bathtub as a mikvah. You have to have a special mikvah made from rainwater with his entire system of mikvah, how to create a kosher mikvah, but not for now.
They have mikvah, and then they've got like a gutter, essentially. That's where the water's coming from. You got to get it there with a pipe somehow.
So that pipe is put, it's cemented into the building. The building is not mekabel tumah, so that pipe ceases to be a vessel anymore when it's part of the building. And so you have the rainwater coming from the roof. Usually, the roof of the mikvah is empty and it's slanted, so that it collects all the rainwater through this pipe, which is part of the building, and that's what goes into the mikvah. And that's what. If it was a pipe that was outside of the, separate from the building, that would be problematic. Yeah.
But these days we have a plastic one.
Still considered a vessel for these issues. Yeah, but we're not going to discuss all the laws how to make a mikvah now. That's a different class. But now I'll just answer Natan. Finish.
Yeah, I made a mistake. I think this was the mikvah that people do before Shabbat. If you can't find one, you can take a shower.
Good. So for all the mitzvot where you need halachically, you are obligated to go into the mikvah. Nowadays, there's only two laws that I know of that you must go to the mikvah, and that is a woman who's wants to be with her husband after menstruating. The only way for her to become permitted to her husband is by toveling in the mikvah. And the second one is this: the laws of immersing vessels, tevilat kelim. For those purposes, it has to be a proper mikvah. There are other uses of mikvah, and of course giur. And of course giur is the third one, which still applies today, right? You have to have a kosher mikvah. Harabait, if you go up to Harabait, that's another one. The other uses of a mikvah, very commonly, nowadays there's men's mikvah. Men don't menstruate. Why do men have to go to the mikvah? They don't. There is a custom though, it's based on a long history. At one point, it might have been a rabbinic obligation. It was never a biblical obligation. Well, when there was the laws of Tumah and Tara, there was a type of Tumah which applied to men. But since there's no Beit HaMikdash, there's no real obligation to go to the mikvah. There is a custom, though, that men go to the mikvah. Some do it every day. Some go to the mikvah every day. This is usually the men have a separate mikvah for men because it could get messy if you use it for both. But that's really just a custom. It's not an absolute obligation. And as Natan's mentioning, some people go to the mikvah before Shabbat to spiritually prepare for the Shabbat. Nice customs, but not an obligation. Now, what you're mentioning about the shower, and this is why you might have gotten mixed up, is there is a law which never got off the ground. It never really became law, that a man must go to the mikvah before studying Torah or praying if he had a seminal emission. If he Baal Keri, it's called in Hebrew, correct? Baal Keri, right? So very good. It's in Masechet Brachot for Shema. People know about it. Very good. So this never really became binding law. Some rabbis tried to make it, but it never really became binding law. And to this day, excuse me, some people are careful about that, even though it's not absolutely a binding law. And whenever they sleep with their wives, or for whatever reason they have a seminal emission, they go to the mikvah every morning before they daven, because they say, I shouldn't be davening if I had a seminal emission. This is not a law. This is a very ancient custom, as I said, from the period when they considered making it a law. And this very ancient custom, this is where the rabbis came up with an idea that there's a second best. If you want to fulfill this ancient custom, you can do that with, it's called Teisha Tish'a kabin. A kav is a measurement, like a liter. This is like 9 liters. It's actually much more than that. I forget exactly how much. And that is when you pour on yourself. It's not immersing, so it's very different than a mikvah. But if someone pours on you 9 kavs of water, it's equivalent to going to the mikvah for this custom of going to the mikvah before you daven or learn. And that can be accomplished through a shower. That's probably what you might have heard, that the shower is good enough, like a mikvah, but that's a custom. That's for that custom, which is, we're talking about halacha here, the obligation of tevilat kelim, of a woman, of giur. There, no shower, no bathtub, only a kosher mikvah. Okay? You can shower your vessels, yes. Yes, Ravi, thank you for waiting. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder, what about Yom Kippur?
There is,
many people used to go to the mikveh. I'm talking about men. When we have Yom Kippur, what's about that?
Yeah, so it can be considered an obligation to go as preparation for Yom Kippur. It doesn't say it in the Torah anywhere. There is some commentators explain that it's actually obligated. It goes back to the times of the temple, when it says chayav adam letaher atzmo baregel. Everybody has to purify himself in preparation for the festival. So again, that made sense in the time when you were going to the temple for the festival. But now we don't have a temple, and we're not going to the temple, and so most assume that that doesn't apply anymore. And Yom Kippur follows that same pattern. But there is also a very ancient custom to prepare yourself for Yom Kippur by going to the mikveh, even men, sometimes actually even women, and Rosh Hashanah, and the festivals, and as I said, some people go every Erev Shabbat, and some people go every day. But that's all still, according to the vast majority of poskim, it's only on the level of custom and not an absolute obligation. Definitely not an obligation from the Torah, like we're talking about here with nida or tevilat kelim. If you hold it's biblical or rabbinic, it has to be a kosher mikvah. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll stop here for today. We'll continue B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure.